For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
Hello and welcome to StratnewsGlobal. I am Surya Gangadharan and welcome to this 8 p.m. special show on Ethiopia. My guest for this evening is from Addis Ababa, Samuel Getachew. You have met him before. We had spoken to him about 3 months ago when the crisis in Ethiopia first erupted. Samuel, good to see you again and welcome.
Thank you.
Samuel, what is the situation now? We are getting a lot of reports that the Tigrayan rebels are about a few hours drive from Addis Ababa. What is the situation on the ground?
Well, it's very hard to know. There are many misinformation that's coming our way. CNN had reported they're in the suburbs last week. That was proven to be wrong, and it's really hard to know. But there are two versions of the same story. The Ethiopian government insists they're somewhere in Dessie and Kombolcha fighting the Ethiopian government. But the other side is claiming that they are advancing to the capital. So it's always who you listen to. It's one of those conflicts where we can't seem to verify many of the information we're receiving, but we're taking care to, because all the information we're telling the public is having an effect, and we're being careful.
Mm-hmm. But your president has been saying that be prepared to defend the capital. Telling people to arm themselves. That does suggest an element of they're preparing defensive measures.
Sure, it was the local government, Addis Ababa government, that said you should register your weapons and you should defend yourself when and if the TPLF comes to town. The TPLF has been declared as a terrorist organization by Ethiopia. And that's why they're claiming that if they do come, they might do so much harm to the population. But the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister has also said Ethiopia is willing to go a distance and even use all the nation can have, including, he said, quote unquote, our bones and blood to defend the interest of Ethiopia and the foundation of the country.
That's very dramatic, Samuel. But I just find it a little odd. I mean, 3 months ago, the Ethiopian military was in full control of Tigray. And then suddenly, within a space of a few months, the entire fortunes had reversed. What happened?
We don't know. But again, there has been an allegation made by mainstream Ethiopia, including some element of the government, saying the United States and some of the UN agencies, the leadership, are siding with the TPLF. The UN has been accused of providing weapons, and that's why 7 of their most senior leadership were removed from the country a few weeks ago. But again, it's something that has really surprised all of us. And as you said, the Ethiopian side was in control, but you also have to know the Ethiopian side said they left Tigray on their will to help farmers, give farmers the space to farm and try to slow down the famine that everybody is talking about in the Tigray region. But the conflict has so far gone to Afar and in Amhara regions, affecting again too many people as a result of it.
Mm-hmm. So where does at that time I recall, the Eritrean military was siding with the Ethiopian military. Is that still the case, or have they parted ways?
No, Ethiopia and Eritrea remain close under this Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Then the Prime Minister spoke from Parliament and said the reason the Eritreans were involved, he said, at the borders was to protect themselves from an attack that the TPLF had planned to wage against them. But again, the relationship between the two countries, while it may slow down once in a while, it has been going on very strong. And that's partly why the Prime Minister won the Nobel Peace Prize. But again, to focus on the humanitarian aspect of this conflict, millions of people have been affected. It's estimated more than 2 million people are affected, displaced Thousands have been killed. Many people are still going to the Sudan, and sexual violation has been happening, and even all these allegations have been reflected by the recent report done by the UN and by the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, which is an arm's length of the Ethiopian government agency.
Mhm. Because I recall at the time, even there were reports that the Ethiopian military was committing sexual abuses and atrocities. There were many reports of that in Tigray.
Well, there are too many allegations to even count. As reflected by the UN report done, led by a former, the UN, who is run by a Chilean, the former president of Chile, who's seen some of this abuse in her own country while she was growing up, even being affected personally, has reflected that all actors are involved, all allegations are being reflected. It's not just one side, as reflected by Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, which has been extremely controversial in the past. It's all actors. And this UN report is and should be the down payment that's needed to really know what really happened, instead of just focusing on allegations, because allegations by itself has become so overwhelming, and we've heard it from all sides. Some of us who live in Ethiopia do not just report from a distance. We do go to these areas. I've been to all those areas, Afar, Tigray, and Amhara. And again, this kind of allegations has been a uniform like allegation that we've been hearing, and as reflected by this UN report, which isn't perfect, but is the most independent report that has come out of this conflict and its legacy.
And this alliance of Tigray and a few other groups, how serious a threat is it to the Abiy government?
Again, it's an open debate. The Ethiopian side insists they're going to defend Ethiopia because to them, this is the foundation of the country. But as you mentioned a few minutes ago, the TPLF has shown strength. If I had said anything less, it would be foolish of me. But
Yeah.
they've shown strength in the past, especially in the few weeks of this conflict. A few weeks ago, they just, started claiming and capturing towns. Again, it has confused all of us, and the Ethiopian government is insisting they're being supported, um, not just by their troops but also outside forces.
Mhm. Are you telling me that the Tigrayan forces are being helped by outside forces, foreign
I'm not
forces?
I'm not telling you that. It's what the prime minister said from parliament.
Uh-huh. And what is there any proof of this? He gave any proof?
I did not see any proof, but he said he gave a speech in front of his senior ministers, saying that they're being supported and they do have the evidence. Again, the evidence hasn't been released, but the Ethiopian side is convinced the reason they're showing strength is because of the support they're receiving from outside. That's according to the prime minister.
Mhm. And who could be the forces backing? Do you believe the US is involved in a move to overthrow Prime Minister Abiy?
Well, that's not a question I should be asked, to be honest. I don't
Mhm.
know. I'm just a journalist reporting the facts on the ground, uh, and that's where I am. But again, it's a mainstream perspective by Ethiopians that the US is supporting uh, the TPLF, and also American media such as CNN is spreading uh, quote unquote fake news within the country. Some of their stories have been proven to be wrong in the past. And again, we've seen in the past, we've seen in the recent protests that thousands of people showed up in the middle of the downtown, which is the Mescal Square, saying that people expressing themselves openly, that American media such as CNN and the US that has also threatened to cancel a trade agreement with Ethiopia that created thousands of jobs is against Ethiopia's interest, and is again accused by the public in support of the TPLF, pushing Ethiopia to somehow negotiate with the TPLF, and that is a mainstream perspective that we're seeing.
So, what is America's motive? What does America want?
I mean, again, you'll have to ask the U.S. That's a question that should be asked to the U.S. government and the U.S. Actors in this conflict, who are involved in this. What's happening in Ethiopia, officials. I mean.
Because it's a bit strange. What are America's interests over there? Are they unhappy with the Abiy government? Is there indications that they were not happy with their policies? Because
Well,
Abiy has been opening up the entire country.
Again, this is a very tricky question. We should all be careful. I take your question with respect, but again, America has been having different interests in the continent, not just in Africa, but I'm sure in many countries. And it's a question based asked of them instead of asking me. But they do seem to have interest in what's going on in Ethiopia. They've invested more than $500 million in this conflict, trying to, aid, people that need support, such as food aid and so on, through their USAID program. But again, it's an interesting question. It's a question that needs to be asked, but the question should be asked of them, not to me, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Some of the reports I read suggest that Egypt is involved because they are concerned about the dam that has been built on the Nile, and they're concerned about water supplies. So they have an interest in destabilizing the Ethiopian government.
I've seen that. I've seen Egypt get involved in the past. I've seen those allegations in the open, but those are allegations made by not just small fringe members of society. It's an allegation that I keep hearing in mainstream conversations. So it's an interesting time. It's a worrying time in Ethiopia, and again we're watching it, and it's really difficult to verify many of these allegations from our end.
Mm. And do you think Sudan could be involved?
Sure,
Perhaps
sure.
not to the same extent, but
Sure, anybody can be involved. Again, these are allegations, serious allegations with impact on the ground. And again, I've seen those allegations. And Sudan and Ethiopia have had a historic relationship in the past, not just over the Renaissance Dam, but even sheltering their displaced people. While you see thousands of Ethiopians heading to the Sudan, I grew up in an era where thousands of Sudanese were coming to our side. So the relationship is not just between governments; it's also between people, the people of Ethiopia and the people of the Sudan. And you also have to know this prime minister got involved in the 2008 or 19 revolution in the Sudan, and he was credited in terms of facilitating the move from a military state to a civilian government that we saw in those years.
Do you believe that the Tigrayans are interested in negotiating an end to this conflict?
Again, the African Union envoy was in Tigray, and he spoke to the leadership in Ethiopia. He's saying there's a small window of opportunity to end this conflict. So that's the latest I have. But I think all Ethiopians, all of us, want to see the suffering to end, because again, the suffering we're seeing on the ground would just shock you. I mean, people are just dying left and right, and people are becoming displaced. There's accusations of sexual violation in this conflict, and I think all of us, we might have different routes where Ethiopians might want the government or the other side to take, but the reality is, I like to think all of us, not just Ethiopians, but the world wants this conflict to end because too many people are being affected by it.
There is some reports that the Tigrayans are trying to cut the supply route to Djibouti, where much of Ethiopia's supplies pass through. Do you have any
Mhm.
information on this?
I've seen the allegations. They came out this morning, per se. But those are allegations we're having a hard time verifying. Um, if you come to Addis Ababa, even at this moment, um, it's business as usual. I mean,
Mhm.
prices are going up. I know, I see that. A kilo of onion uh, is the price you might be quoted an hour ago will be different after a few hours. If it is linked to the conflict, I don't know. It seems like it. But any actor trying to stop the route from here to perhaps to Djibouti, I've seen the allegations, and we're trying to verify this information, and we aren't able to. But we're watching it from a distance. It's been a challenge for all of us to report on this conflict. There's the human connection part of it, which is really hard to report, and there's also the other side, which is the public's right to know, and we want the public to know. I think Ethiopians deserve to know, and we're working day and night to see that happen. But it's been a challenge. I recognize it's been a challenge, but we're looking at this story you just mentioned. I've seen it.
Is is Prime Minister Obi willing to negotiate? As he said, let's talk.
Well, again, Prime Minister Abiy said, I'm sure you might have seen his video, said he is going till the end to try to bury the enemy, he said. And from both sides, it doesn't seem like anyone is interested in negotiating or calling a ceasefire at this moment. And they just want to go ahead and fight. So again, it's one of those conflicts where there are no winners at the end.
Last question, Samuel. Was Prime Minister Abiy too precipitate in going ahead with an invasion of Tigray 3 months ago? Should he have held back? Should he have negotiated?
Every conflict, while it's conducted, you can look back and see the mistakes, what happened, not just because of history, but you just want to learn because that's what leadership is all about. There will be time when everyone will sit down and see when they see the effects of this conflict, they will learn from. So going back and saying this should have been done and this wasn't done is again a question that should be asked by the actors that were involved. I like to focus on the humanitarian part, which has been overwhelming, which has been really, really touching for many of us. When we look at conflict in Africa, I mean, you've seen it in India. It's just
Yeah,
they give you numbers. They don't show
yeah,
you the faces behind these numbers. And we're
absolutely.
beginning to see their faces, and it's been difficult for all of us. And I like to focus on the humanitarian past, and I hope this nightmare will end in Ethiopia.
On that note, Samuel Getachew, thank you very much for appearing on our show and look forward to connecting with you in the future. Thank you again very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Right. And for all of you out there, keep following us on YouTube, on Instagram. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Keep coming to us with your comments and observations. Thank you. Good night.